very special guest today. I have Heather on with me, and we're going to be chatting, and I'm super excited to hear her story. So I will let her introduce herself.
Hi. Yes, I'm Heather, and I was diagnosed with Turner syndrome literally from birth. I'm 30 years old. My birthday comes in April, so I'm an Aries. So yeah.
Very nice. Man, I am just getting to talk to so many people close to my age. I turned 30 on the 14th.
Oh wow. Okay.
That's awesome. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm always intrigued to hear the story of how you were diagnosed.
Okay. Yes. Um, my mom, she had some like problems in her pregnancy with me, so her stomach wasn't measuring like it should. So, the doctor did ultrasounds, and they saw water behind the neck. And so they didn't know at that time, like in the early 90s, they didn't know exactly what the cause of it. So they told my mom it could either be Down syndrome, spina bifida. I could, either born blind or deaf, missing a limb. So they really didn't know what it actually was, and they wanted my mom to cancel out the pregnancy. But my mom and my dad was like, no. So later on, after I was, they rushed me all the way and like to all these specialists, and so they took me to a cardiac doctor and to kidney doctors and every doctor you can imagine, and they came back and said, yes, indeed, I did have Turner syndrome, and they said that's pretty much the best outcome that could have been out of all the things they said I could have had. So it's really interesting growing up with having. Like, I've always known my mom never kept anything from me when it came to that. So throughout my life, she just would tell me why I had to go to a heart doctor every 3 to 6 months, why I had to go to a kidney doctor. Um, at first, I didn't really understand what it was. So as I, got older, I would just hang out with friends, and I was just doing just fine. But I always noticed I was always shortest one in my class, and I was like I was always the shortest one in my class, and I um never like started puberty like everybody else did, and so I always like I always knew why that was, but as it didn't hit me until I got older and I realized like this I'm different, in a way, I didn't add up to my friends. I couldn't really talk to my friends about, I guess, things that a woman would go through around that age. And of course, I got the "oh, you're so lucky," and I was like, "well, I feel different, not so much lucky at that point." And so, um, yeah, coming from like the early 90s, they really didn't have any like at that time terms from societies or anything, nor did they know of anything like that. So, as it went on, and I was like, I need to talk to other people around my age or that has what I have, because, I always felt like nobody really understood me, and I tried to talk to friends, but they just didn't get it. And so I, begged my doctors, and I researched and did everything I could to try to find other people to contact with, and finally I got success with it finally. But it was hard because my teachers always yelled at me like, you gotta do your work with you. You can't just take off every 3 6 months. Where are you going? Why you keep taking off? And I got so frustrated. I'm like, I don't want to go to the doctors every 3 6 months anymore.
I
Yeah.
totally get that. We
Yeah.
actually have very similar stories. It was also fluid in the back of my neck that while my mom was pregnant with me, that was what red flagged for them. And they also thought it was possibly spina bifida. Um, However, they did an amniocentesis, and that was what gave them my diagnosis of Turner syndrome. So that's really interesting. The 90s, the early 90s were definitely a very new time for finding things out about it. Um,
Yes.
I know my mom's told me that she had gotten told about some support groups, maybe. I don't know if it was specifically for those with Turner's or like a generic genetic condition support group or something. I think maybe it was specific to Turner's, but I'm not sure. But as I got older was when I kind of started trying to create community. What were some of the ways that you started working on that? Because you talked about how big of a difference it made, and it did for me too. What were some of the ways you did it?
I just kept bugging my doctors and asked them if they knew anything. I went online when, when online was accessible. Like, 'cause it got better over the years, the internet did. So I'm like, I'm gonna keep researching this. I got something in the mail, and I believe it was from the Turner Society. And so at that time, I called them and I was like, "Do you guys know any like where I can talk to other girls like me?" They're like, "Sorry, we don't have that. We don't do that kind of thing." And I'm like, "Okay." So I just kept talking to my endocrinologist, and finally, as I was leaving the office one day, she came running towards me and said, "Wait, I just gave this to you. I'm glad you're still here." And she handed me like I don't know how many papers about the TSSUS, and she handed it to me. And so I called them up, and they automatically linked me to a whole bunch of girls, and they just kept calling me. My phone kept ringing, like, "Hi, I heard you need to talk." I'm like, "Thank you."
That's awesome. So, was it mostly in person or online that you would talk to others?
At first it was online, like it was just like over the phone and things like that. Then they told me about the groups and stuff, so I started adding myself into groups, and then I got a whole bunch of girls just flooding into my Facebook, and yeah, and then I at that time I was like as couple like a year went on, I was like I need to actually meet somebody in person. So I actually met a few sisters that in person.
That's awesome. So, and I totally feel what you said about not wanting to go to the doctor every 3 to 6 months anymore. That
Yes.
I think was when I was younger, probably the biggest way I struggled with Turner's was I didn't have anything actively super wrong. And it just, I don't know, it added to feeling off or feeling weird to have to go that often. And I don't know, how did you work through that?
I don't think I actually really ever did. I just remember like screaming at my mom because I was like a child, so I was like screaming at mom like I'm not going. I would hide under my bed, and because I kept asking my mom like, why do I have to go, but my cousins, my family never have to. Like, they never have to miss school like I do. And I would talk to my cousins, and they were like, oh, why? We don't have to miss school like that. And I was just like, well, I don't want to either. So, but at the end of it, I had, I was forced to go. So, and then, because we had to go out like an hour out of town, if not a little bit longer than that. We had to leave like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were spent all day over there, because, we didn't have a car at the time, so we had to just take any medical transportation that we could. And they were like the highest specialist that I've been seeing since I was born. So my mom's like, no, you got to go. And I told her I was getting complaints from the teachers, even with a excuse, absence excuse. They were still yelling at me. Yeah.
That's hard. So the teachers weren't understanding about you needing to be gone for that.
Yeah. I think it's what it comes down to. Not a lot of people know about Turner syndrome. And when I was in high school, I felt like it was time to really just tell people. So I wrote like a little essay on my teacher's computer and she literally told me the next day, I'm sorry, but I read your little thing you wrote on my computer. And she goes, I never knew what Turner syndrome was. She goes, I didn't even know you would have that. I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, don't use that excuse because, yeah, you might have some learning disabilities with it, but you can you get what you put into it. My high school teacher told me. So she goes, you will be learning this. I was like, okay.
Sometimes that push can be helpful.
Yeah.
So had she heard of Turner syndrome before then?
No.
Okay.
Not until she read my whole thing I wrote.
Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting. So did you have anything in particular that you like resources that you had in school that kind of helped? I don't know about you, but math is my worst enemy. And
Oh yeah.
so I needed all the help in that department I could get.
I was in a special education program, like a severe special education program. My teacher would sit down with me one-on-one every few days and help me if I needed help. She had a teacher's aide that would sit there and come over and help me as well. She would break down the problems on the board and stuff like that. But my education that I had was kind of bad because they put me in like the same boat as like others, like with more severe disabilities. And because they couldn't learn timetables, I got held back from learning timetables just because majority of my class could not learn it.
Interesting. So, do you feel like the help you were able to get for that in school, do you feel like her knowing about Turner's versus not knowing, like, was there a major difference before she knew versus after?
Oh, yeah, she understood why I was, had him in school. She would ask me how I'm doing. She understood why sometimes when I was in school they needed they had a defibrillator and I did gym, and because I had they said I had prolonged LQT due to taking growth hormones. My cardiologist told me, which I never heard about that before. So she told me that. So yes, I feel like it was more awareness of, okay, take care of yourself. If you have to go to doctors, I understand why. Don't pretty much she kind of let me. If I need to go to doctors, just let me go.
So, what would you say health-wise is the biggest impact Turner's has had for you?
Just I would say try to get over certain humps with Turner syndrome, like coping with one day starting a family, that it will be trying to overcome that. Like sometimes my days are better than others. Like some days I'm like, oh, it's fine, I could just adopt, like it's no big deal. And then other days I'm just like, well, I really would like to have a child that's like it's from me. So it flip flops. So that's probably the biggest struggle I have. That, and of course learning math.
Amen.
Yes.
Oh man. So yeah, that is, I think just because that struggle is a mental one, not it is physical, but I don't know, the processing is just different. There's a much greater mental aspect to it.
Yeah.
And it just hits you harder than some of the other stuff. And for me, it really tied into, like, it started as early as puberty, I think, for me, because I did have that same experience where, I'd get the, oh, you're so lucky you don't have to deal with having a cycle thing. And I'm like, I don't feel lucky. I feel like an alien, but okay.
Yeah, exactly how I felt. And I got that all the time, and I'm like, says yourself.
Yeah. I think part of that for me, why I struggled with that and I didn't feel lucky, was I couldn't untie it from what having kids was going to look like. And, at that time, I didn't know if that was an indicator of what that was going to be for me.
Yeah.
So it kind of was just more of a reminder of that potential rather than oh, good, I don't have to worry about it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, now that I've had it, I understand, and I do, I can appreciate that, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I don't care about the whole, other aspects that come with, be able to have kids. Can I just skip all that and just go to be able to have kids?
Yeah, like I probably would have completely been able to feel that I was lucky to not have to deal with it until it was at least 2 or 3 years past most of my friends before I started my cycle. And if I knew I wouldn't have to worry about infertility because of it, I probably would have been able to feel lucky.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't it wasn't that part of it. It wasn't the physically having it, although feeling normal by having it was nice, but
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Yeah, it's just weird how like different things, like different parts of life, it hits you differently.
yes. Yeah. And I think age for me has been a big thing, like being able to process at each different age what it looks like for me.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything specific you would have told yourself when you were younger, knowing what you know and having experienced what you've experienced now?
Um, yeah, just just be careful like of certain things that I have done in my life because like I've had to get a job coach and I've been looked at differently. Certain people that I've told that I've worked with, they looked at me differently because I think there's a stigma with the word syndrome, which is totally ridiculous. So I would let myself know like, not everybody's gonna be understanding and is gonna understand, that word. So just don't like be open, but don't be careful with who, at certain points of my life and that what I go through is not the typical norm that some people experience. So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, deciding who or if to tell people um is always an interesting thing because I encourage sharing your story. I think it's amazing, it's incredible, and there's no value you can put to being able to hear other stories. But on the other hand, I think there's a reason that we get nervous for it,
yeah.
and I know for me, I didn't until I was so much older. I was married before I ever put that I had it even on the internet.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I had told a few close friends before then, but mostly it was just my family and those few friends. I didn't make a huge thing of telling a bunch of people. What was your experience? It sounds like you had a very interesting one at a job.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, like I had a job coach because they were there to help people with disabilities and I always felt like I didn't need that because I don't. I feel like because yes, Turner syndrome is a syndrome. I feel like that doesn't inhabit us from knowing how to like fill an application out and like to get a job of our own. So I felt a little weird about that, but I tried it. And people would ask me like, "Why do you need a job coach for?" You seem pretty, okay. And I was like, "Oh, I am." I was like, "I just have Turner syndrome." I said, and I'm just trying this out basically right now, because that just part of things that are accessible to me with I guess for help. And at that point they just start talking to me differently, like they actually talk down to me as if I was like a child.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Then they found out like what was wrong, they why I had a job coach, they just kind of talked down to me. And I could tell like the way they talked to me versus talking to the other employees, they just looked at me all weird and talked to me differently. Another job I worked at, I had my paperwork and everything down like on my it's private work, paperwork. And I guess the owner of where I worked, I guess blabbed that I have Turner syndrome. And this one lady came up to me and asked me if I would want to um, give her talk to her granddaughter or daughter or someone like that in her family because they were in college, I guess, learning about different disabilities or whatever. And she wanted to interview me about Turner syndrome because she never heard about it. And somehow it got around my job that that I had Turner syndrome. And I'm just kind of scratching my head like how that happened. I didn't just willy nilly tell everybody. So
Yeah, wow.
yeah,
That would definitely be something that would make me go, I don't think I need to be here then.
yeah.
That's hard. So, have you found most people have been really great and encouraging when you've shared?
Yeah, I definitely have more people understanding me more than not. I've talked to people and they looked at me, they're like my one coworker, she looked at me and she's like, okay, you might have syndrome, but I can tell you right now, I don't, there's nothing wrong with you. So stop blabbing that around. I was like, okay. She's like, you almost like using it as an excuse. I'm like, not really. So yeah, I've had people just look at me like you don't look any different to me. Like I don't know why you told me that. You're like you look fine. I'm like yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think it being so varying and diverse,
Yeah.
I've always thought the syndrome aspect of it, while I can see why it's what's used, it's also like I don't feel like it explains it as well.
Yeah.
Because I've always looked at Turner syndrome since I've researched more and understood it better. I've always seen it much more as a spectrum.
Yeah. I can agree with that.
It's just something that's way too varying. You know, I have to catch myself with not judging myself almost when I compare the symptoms, and it can be a little bit of a humbling moment when you're looking at the WebMD description and comparing if your nails turn up or something, you know, like all of those weird, small, crazy things they say happens.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's just not enough. I feel like not enough knowledge. Um, so I think it's really great with that more women are coming forward on YouTube and just different platforms. I've seen people, having blogs now, like not actual blogs. So that's pretty good. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so great. I think the biggest thing I've heard from people is the research part of it is one thing, but just having more people even know what it is if you say the word Turner syndrome is so important.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Because I feel like everybody else knows everything else is, but when you say Turner syndrome, they're like, huh? I never heard of that before. Like when somebody thought once I was making a joke and they laughed at me and I'm like, that's not. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not making a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and even within the scariest part for me has been even within the medical community.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever had that experience of having a doctor, like, because I've had to go to urgent care for ear infections, so it's been a doctor I don't normally see, and I've had them ask me, what's Turner syndrome again?
Yeah. I literally printed out like so many papers and I gave it to one doctor that I went to, and she was like, "Oh yeah, thank you for that." She goes, I remember doing this when I was in college, but it's good to have a refresher because I haven't dealt with anybody who has this. So I mean, did she read it? I really don't know. I really don't know. But like, I feel like I learned more about transgender as time goes on because like I fell and I got a blood clot, and then I found out that I have small veins. So of course I asked around, I looked online, and actually it's one of the things that is like known for us to have is like very small veins. Yeah, and I was like, even that shocked me. I'm like, how I didn't know this, So I yeah, it's definitely important for like a medical field to know because there's a lot of things that even us who have it don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and to some extent I can understand why, like it can feel like it's really rare, which to some extent, yes, but if you think about the bigger numbers, it's not as rare as I think we feel like.
Yeah.
But even so the pediatrician that my parents were taking my brothers to when my mom got pregnant with me, when they got the diagnosis, my mom called him and told him, okay, got another one coming to you. And it's a girl. After 3 boys, it's finally a girl, and she has Turner syndrome. And he kind of was like, oh, okay. And she goes, do you know what that is? And he goes, yes, but I'm going to need to refresh my memory. I'm going to need to re-up my game on it, and I'll call you back. But yes, don't worry. I will do my research and remind myself, like, I will get back on top of that. And because of his diligence in catching that way, he had several specialists at the hospital the minute I was born that took me and looked me over. And it's just incredible what that little mindset of seeking awareness can do.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we need a lot more of it. It's not done with, research and with knowing. It's totally not done yet. It's just beginning, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. Did the doctors, when you were born, did they know what Turner syndrome was before that?
I think they did because they're like the highest specialist. So I think they already did because they did like all these tests on me the minute I was born. So they told my mom that I had a correctation of the aorta. So I had to get checked on that all the time. They told my mom about my horseshoe kidneys, and yeah. So as my mom woke up from the surgery, because she had a C-section, they told her everything that they found with doing their, medical exams and tests on me. And so that definitely helped. And I was already 6 kids, so I would always go to the hospital throughout my whole childhood, from ear infections and, surgeries. Yeah, like I feel like one time I went to the hospital with a cold. And they're like, okay, you're fine, just a cold. Go home, get some rest, and you should be fine. That's okay. But the next day, I was dehydrated. I had upper respiratory infection. I had a UTI. Like, it was just a whole thing. I go back to the hospital, and the doctor that saw me prior comes in because he got called in. He comes in and checks me over. He's like, you were not like this yesterday.
Yeah. That fun immune system issues. Yeah.
And they were like puzzled, and they were like, how did this even happen? Like, if you were like this yesterday, we wouldn't let you go home. And I'm like, Turner syndrome, this happens to me all the time. Yeah.
Oh man, I know. I went to the urgent care. I didn't know for sure if I had an ear infection or not, but I get them so easily. And my ear was hurting bad enough. I was like, I want to make sure. I don't want to let this go too far, And the doctor was just so baffled by how small my ear canals were and so distracted by that. And I'm like, dude, look at the rest of me. It's in proportion, for one. 2, it says I have Turner syndrome if you read my chart. That should tell you something.
Yeah. It makes you think, like, did they actually read their charts before they come in the bed and into like the room?
I know. It's like a quick skim or something. And I think part of that is a product of when you're not a specialist, you're not focusing on that in your education in school. So like your doctor said, she had to remind herself. She remembered it from college, but she had to remind herself. When you're not focused on that, it's easy to have things like that slip under or not be something that you're as well versed on. And that's the biggest reason I feel like more understanding within the medical community is so important, because you could miss something more serious than whether I had an ear infection or not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree.
If you don't know what you're looking for. I mean, that sounds super like doomsday scary to think about, but I don't know. That's what I think about. And that's why it always gets to me when I think about a doctor at an emergency room not knowing enough to catch those things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So it sounds like you've had a few of the health complications.
Yeah.
What would you say was the biggest one?
Ear infections, like crazy, for sure. That led to a lot of scar tissue and almost going deaf. At like 4 or so, maybe even 5, I had to have a speaker up to my ear and because I couldn't hear the TV, so I got tubes put in my ears to fix with that. I had a kidney surgery when I was 2.
Okay.
It was just a whole thing, just a whole thing.
So what was the kidney surgery like? Is there any lasting effects from that?
I have a big scar on my side. Yeah, it took about, I think, like 2 to 3 hours surgery at only 2 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
The tubing was pinched in the middle, so they had to go in there and fix it. Yeah.
Did you have to have surgery for the coarctation?
No. When I hit about 12, 13 years old, they said it repaired, like it's gone.
Wow.
Yeah. And my cardiologist was like shocked.
Yeah. Do you still get it checked really frequently?
Once a year. I went from every 3 to 6 months to 1 year. So I'm like, okay, this is more doable.
Yes.
So that's been pretty, I learned a lot throughout that process, and it was, I gotten better since I'm older. I'm not like as sick as, when I was a kid, but it was a ride. It was a long ride.
Yeah, oh man. I remember the first time I went to an endocrinologist, going through all of the testing. That almost scared me more than like what WebMD says, because I'm like, this is a lot.
Yeah. I know there's like a Wikipedia on it, and I was trying to read it, because I know people, I know it's a thing where people can actually like edit it to their own liking. So I'm like looking through it to make sure it's accurate, because I was gonna like completely like go in there and like refix it all. I'm like, okay, but it seemed like it was made by another transgender woman, because there was accurate information on there. So I'm like, okay, this passes. For sure.
Yeah. Oh man. It's hard because you want to get as much understanding as you can, but it's just like the doctors, when they saw the diagnosis, well, even before they knew what it was, they gave my parents a less than 1% chance of me even living.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah.
Had they had the mindset of, not all of this is guaranteed, we don't know enough to know for sure what's going to happen, I think looking back, they wouldn't have been as doomsday as they were, because so much of what you see is so scary.
Oh yeah. They told my mom that that the pregnancy might not even last, and that she should just get rid of it anyways. And that's like, I know that's like a common theme with a lot of us, is that the women's moms have been told, or the parents have been told, to just terminate the pregnancy, that it's going to go nowhere, and so I feel like that again, that's definitely lack of knowledge, because I mean, clearly, yes, at that time my mom didn't even know that it was only 1% chance. Like, they didn't even tell her it was that rare to make it to actual birth. So as I got older and I realized that, and I saw it around the community, I was like, really? Because I never was told that. None of the doctors ever told my mom that. They just like, yeah, just terminate the pregnancy. It can be one of these things. Just let it go.
Yeah. When they found the fluid, because mine was not just in the back of my neck, but it was also in my chest cavity.
Oh.
So they were even more concerned, because they're like, there's no way her organs are going to develop enough for her to survive. So to some extent, yes, they were right. Had the fluid not done what it did and dissipated, gone back to where it should have been, I easily wouldn't have made it. There's, that's a fair assessment, that if this does not change, it's fatal. However, they left no room for it changing. And when it did, they were hard pressed to believe it. And they did also push termination on my parents. And so then when the fluid had shifted at the last minute, they were like, no. And the doctors actually apologized later for pushing it so hard. They used the verbiage with my parents, like they told my mom, if you don't terminate now, we can't keep you from delivering a dead baby. And that's really harsh language to use in that scenario.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It just, yeah. You know, my mom and my dad fought really hard. They told the doctors to basically just, they used choice words with the doctors and, you know, tell them, you know, just be gone. And my mom said she would walk to the library, read any books, used any type of computer that was back in that time, and just did any research she could possibly do and find. And yeah.
Did
She
they
used a lot of time.
ever find a doctor that was more helpful?
Yeah. Like the specialists were pretty well. They adverse in what it was. My mom tried to get more doctors that was closer to town as I got older. And so we walked into my pediatrician, and he walks in the room. He's like, "Oh, you have Turner syndrome, don't you?" And my mouth dropped, and I'm like, "Huh?" Like that never happened to me before. I always had to say to them, "I have Turner syndrome." He's like, "Oh yeah, your neck is webbed, your fingers are shorter, you can't, you know, your fingers are even puffy." He goes, "You're short." He goes, "You have Turner syndrome." It's like, "Yes." I'm like, "You're good." He's like, "Thank you." And I kept him ever since when I was until I had to, you know, age out of a pediatrician. I was so sad. I was so sad. But I was like, if I can find a doctor as an adult, like as adverse as he was, I'd be good. You know, a lot of them should learn from him because not everybody's like him and knows, you know. And it's
Yeah.
kind of sad that pediatrician would know versus a adult doctor for adults.
Yeah. And even within specialists, like the different experiences I've had with endocrinologists, I don't know about you, but I've had a few as an adult.
Mhm.
Like I had a really great pediatric endocrinologist. But as an adult, I've had such a wide, like so many different experiences depending on who the doctor was with a specialist.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely like, you know, every time I have to go to the doctors, I always got to tell them, you know, new doctors I see, no matter who it is, I'm like, yeah, you know, this is what I have, because I can't wait for the day where I don't have to do that anymore. You know, it'd be great.
Yes, that will be very nice.
Yeah.
Would you say that's the biggest way you find yourself having to advocate for yourself at the doctors, is just making sure they're aware?
Oh yes. If they asked me what is that, I would, you know, because I went to an endocrinologist and he was floored. I mean, he took pictures of my hands because of how small my fingers were. Yeah. He's like, I never saw it before. Take a picture. You gotta take a picture of your hands so I can, like, you know, use it for comparison going forward, and other people that I might have that turn syndrome. This way I can, you know, I can have it for further reference. I'm like, sure.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had such stark experiences. My first adult endocrinologist was up on all of the current research, up on stuff people were trying. And she was like, we can try whatever you want. We can adjust anything you want. Like we're so down to try things and see what works for you. And she was so current on her knowledge of the research and everything. And then I go to a different one after I had to move, and she brushes aside that my medicine was hurting my stomach. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what
A
was
lot of
your
doctors.
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, a lot of the doctors, they know what I can't take because of the heart condition I have, more than they know about, like, Turner syndrome itself.
Yeah. What was your experience like with growth hormones and then HRT? Did you do HRT?
um, I did. I used to. When I first went on growth hormone, that was a day. I had to go back, and it's the same, town that I would go into my other specialist, and the endocrinologist was like, come on, at least she talked me into taking the growth hormone, and I was like, of course, like young, so I'm like, no needles, I don't want that, like no. And she's like, well, come on, just try it. If you don't like it, you can get off of it. I'm like, fine. So we drive like again over an hour to the town. It's Westchester in New York, and I would go over there, and we were there the whole day. So we finally got my shot, but I was I was so scared of it. I ran to my mom and I clung to her, and they're like, okay, you can go get your mom and we'll give you the shot. I'm like, okay. So they did it in my arm, and the whole day I had to lug around, like a cooler with little vials of the growth hormone and extra hypodermic needles, just going around for like hours, just walking around with it in this cooler
Oh my
until we
goodness.
got a chance to get home. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it actually didn't work for me. My growth was not any faster. It was still slow, and I still, I feel like it might have helped me get to 411. I feel like I might have been small, certainly short, than I am now, but I didn't feel like it really helped me per se, personally, um, as it has helped other people that I've noticed. But with me, it was just like no. And I think it was part of my genetics because I have a lot of short people in my family anyway. So I think my genetics were like, no, don't make me get taller. She's meant to be short anyway. And with HRT, I took that when I was about 14 till I was 16. And that wreaked havoc on like the whole mental and physical aspect because became like almost like a rebel when I was that age. Like I would talk back to my mom. I even like smacked her one time, and then I quickly realized like, oh no, and I just apologized. And she got all upset with me, and I got punished for smacking her, obviously. But it was the whole growth. It was the whole HRT. That was wreaking. I don't know if it was like too much for me. If I feel like it was more bearable when I took the patches versus the pill, because when I took the pill, I feel like it just had more of an impact on everything at once, and my body didn't know how to handle it. But I did get a lot of body, um, maturity as it went on. But I stopped taking it because I read like the horrible things about it, you know. And so I was like, oh, I'm not taking it no more. I'm not doing that. But as I'm older, I'm like, I really want to go back on it. Like, I kind of want my body to look more mature. I want to look a little bit more mature, because I'm might be 30, but I feel like people won't take me seriously because I look younger.
Mm.
So I'm like, I want to take it now, but since I have a blood clot in my leg due to falling and everything, I can't take it at the moment. So I'm just like, I really, really wish I could take it again.
Yeah. Yeah. HRT is, whew. I remember when I first started on mine, it had such a impact on how I emotionally felt. And I think for me, you hit the nail on the head with the pills being not perfect. to put it,
Yes.
to put it lightly.
Yeah.
I also had the best experience I've had so far on the patch. And I do think it's something that would be the biggest area I would love more research and knowledge on, is the hormone side of it, and like the impact of the options that they give us. Because that scenario where my doctor brushed aside my stomach hurting when I took my medicine, it was on the pill, and it was because of how high the estrogen was.
Yeah.
And it's things like that I feel like we don't yet know, or are not putting enough attention to perfecting how individual we are, and putting that on the hormone aspect of everything too.
Oh yeah, I agree. I feel that, because have Turner syndrome, and I feel like our bodies do know it. And so when we put estrogen in our bodies, and I feel like the doctors only give us the normal amount that a woman who doesn't have Turner syndrome would have. But for us, because our body's like, wait, you're not supposed to have that, I feel like we're meant to have a little bit more or less than what, an average woman would have. Like my, estrogen my sister might have might be too much if I was take the same kind of dosage. Um, you know, because that she has naturally, because it might be too much for me. And I asked them about it, and they're just like, "Oh, that's as low as we can go." And they say, "But we can't. It goes lower in a patch." And I'm thinking, well, I think the pill should go lower too, than just the patch going lower. And I felt like I had more control over my emotions for sure, being on the patch versus estrogen. But then it became that, a reaction for it being on the skin. So I started getting a rash because of it. So I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, it's that, and that didn't start being a rough thing for me until I became an adult. I think I think part of it is probably just our bodies change as we get older. So
Yeah.
like my hormones probably had changed and I needed to readjust anyways.
Yeah.
But and individually looking at estrogen and progesterone levels instead of having them all in one pill in that generic level is important too. We aren't taking it for the birth control aspect of it. So
Yeah.
those levels matter way more for us, to be more specific.
And everybody's case is different. Like you were saying, like, only because, another transgender woman might be taking more than the next doesn't mean it works for everybody.
Absolutely, because I feel like, and this is where I try not to say too much of what I know is my opinion versus what I can like verify by fact or research, but
Yeah.
I suspect that if you tested all of us without anything helping our hormone levels, we would all be making our own varying different levels of it and not just a flat all of it, because that's how you get like some spontaneously are able to conceive and have that development still, or that function still preserved, while others do not.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I know one girl who has 0, and I have higher than that, and I'm just like, what does this mean? For
Yeah.
me going forward. So it's very interesting, for sure.
Yeah, and that can be, I mean, it was a bit when I started actually struggling with like what the best HRT for me was, it was a bit of an emotional journey.
Oh no.
Because you're trying different stuff, and of course that's that's shifting your hormones, so that doesn't help.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was, and I didn't expect that. That was a part of things that kind of blindsided me.
Yeah. I was told one time my skirt was ugly, and I just remember dramatically falling to the ground and just crying. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Because without estrogen, I don't usually I'm not as emotional. Like I do cry and stuff like that, but it's not, if someone says, "Oh yeah, your skirt's ugly," I'd be like, "Well, go do something then. I don't know. Who cares? Don't look at it then or something." Versus just bawling my eyes out because someone said my skirt was ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can always tell when because I have to be honest about not always being perfect with taking my HRT or doing what I should. So when I've given myself too long of not being consistent with it, I notice because I cry at like everything.
Yeah.
Like I'm just constantly on the verge of tears if I'm not good and consistent, and didn't used to be that way.
Yeah. I can definitely agree. I would, every little thing that would make me, like, even things that would make me cry naturally, I would cry tenfold because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, oh man, the commercials on the TV, like just so much, way too easily.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So What would you say is the biggest thing with Turner's that surprised you, that kind of you didn't expect?
Um, that there's actually people out there like me, and not just a few, like a lot amount. Because I was always told by doctors that it's very rare, and me finding anybody who has that is like needle in a haystack because it's so rare. And I was like, oh, okay. And I used to think like, oh, am I the only one here like that has it? Like, I I feel like I'm the only one, you know. And
Yeah.
so when I started joining the community and everything, and I saw how many people were in these groups, I'm like, what? There's actually like all these people. I was actually shocked. That really did surprise me.
Yeah.
And then from then, the more knowledge I'm getting, um, than I ever knew before growing up is also still surprising. And I like the fact that like I'm able to go on these groups and ask, hey, have you been through this? Have you been through that? Trying to get more majority, see if anybody has experience with that, or is it just mostly me? Yeah, we all are different, so I try to take that accountability. Like, yes, we're all different, so what's going on with me might sound similar, but might not be the same situation. So I try to take everybody's in account and see, and go from there.
Yeah, that's been, oh man, being in the Facebook group has taught
Yeah.
me so much just from reading everybody's stories.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very touching.
Yes, yeah, and oh my gosh, think the ones that I always get emotional with is the moms posting. Um, I'm just always like, I don't know, it hits so much more close to home for me because I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. Because it makes you think like, did my parents go through the same thing?
yeah,
Did my parents think this way? And then you start thinking about that, like, okay, that's kind of sad that he thought of like that. But hey, the outcome is, definitely better. So
yeah, it's, oh man, being able to read other parents' stories has been something
yeah.
interesting too, because some things I've shared with like my mom when we've been talking that I've read on there from other parents, and she's like, "Oh yeah," and I would have never thought that like I'd never heard that part of it or whatever, and
Yeah.
I love being connected in that way. And I don't
Yeah.
think it was something I realized I needed until I had it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can definitely vouch for that because, not seeing other people's point of view on how they had it, like how they became diagnosed with it, definitely gave me a different perspective. Because like I said, when I was growing up, that wasn't accessible to me ever. So
Yeah.
I like the fact that like I get to go on the groups and read different people's, different, just different way of coming over it. Like I've heard somebody who got diagnosed at like 18, and
Yeah.
I was like shocked. And I go, really? So
Yeah. Oh
that's
yeah.
really different.
I remember the first time I found out about a story where this woman didn't find out she had Turner syndrome until she couldn't get pregnant. And I'm
Yeah,
like, wait, that's a thing? And it
yeah,
is. It is not, I mean, it's probably not the most common experience, but it is also not the rarest experience, I don't think.
that's right. Yeah, it's just very interesting. It really is because you learn more from it as well,
Mhm.
for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And sharing resources is also like one of my favorite things too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm always going on TSSUS website and just like looking at different like specialists that they suggest from their website, and I'm like, I need to like go there, but they're like 2 hours out of town, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So
I know I was just looking at Leaping Butterfly Ministries,
yeah.
and I know you had mentioned, I think you had said you had almost gone deaf. I don't know if you struggle with your hearing now.
Not really, but they said that my left ear is, a lot less of hearing than my right.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that just because you had more ear infections in that ear?
Yeah. Yeah, they said it was all this because I have built up scar tissue.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my primary doctor, when I lived in Florida, she thought I had an ear infection, and my ears felt fine. And I know what an ear infection feels like. And then she just kept pulling things out of my ear, and she said it was an infection, but I kind of thought maybe it was actually this built up scar tissue that she was pulling out.
Oh
I
wow.
was thinking,
Interesting.
yeah, because I never had a fever. My ears never turned bright red. They never hurt or anything like that. I still took it just in case maybe it was starting on something, but I really believe that she was pulling scar tissue out because, you know, with just the lack of knowledge I think she had. I don't think she quite understood all about what was my medical history.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason I even brought that up is I found out they well, not just now, but when I first started looking into stuff to potentially have to get hearing aids at some point, I found out Leaping Butterfly Ministry has a really incredible hearing aid scholarship.
Oh, okay.
So that was just a little tidbit I wanted to share.
Yeah.
I have moderate, mid frequency hearing loss, which is like the worst because it's the frequency that everybody talks at.
Yeah.
It's the hardest one to have conversations with. But okay, well, thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything you wanted to mention or share before we wrap up?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything that I think people should know for
Okay.
sure.
It's been so great talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Of course, thank you so much.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.